Welcome to the Second Bite podcast, where we talk with top entrepreneurs and CEOs about creating valuable companies through creative transactions. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome to the Second Bite podcast. Jeffrey Spanbauer is with me today. Jeffrey, super happy to have you as our guest. It's going to be a great episode.
Todd, thrilled to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
It is. This is going to be really interesting because you have gone through what I would consider to be a full life cycle. Started out as a founder, partnered with private equity, became a buyer, did a bunch of great acquisitions, and now have kind of moved on within your company to the role of executive chairman. You brought somebody in to be the CEO and do the day-to-day work. So I'm hoping in our time together we can unpack all of those things, and the lessons learned would be a great win for our listeners. I want to start with just a really quick thank you to our friends at Fiscal Advocate. Fiscal Advocate, I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they're a finance and accounting platform for agencies, and it helps them take their financial data, put it onto a dashboard so they can see it, understand it, and make good decisions from it. So they're a friend of the show. They're wonderful. John Morris is a agency guy himself. So thank you to John and to Fiscal Advocate. When we jump in, Jeff, if you could, quick introduction to you and the business, who you serve and what you do for them, and then we'll start to unpack questions.
Sounds great. So for me, you said I had a full life cycle. Before I started my company, I actually worked in corporate America for about almost 15 years. So started my career at Procter & Gamble, and really learned a ton there. It's a great place to learn how to be a great marketer. And came to the realization after about 5 years that I was in the hair care marketing space, and making women feel insecure about their hair was not my life's calling. So I decided to really do something I was more passionate about, which was healthcare. And so I got hired by Pfizer to do marketing at Pfizer. And it was a really great experience learning how healthcare really operated, how you could really educate and partner with doctors to help improve patients' lives. And after about 7 years there, I had the opportunity to leave with a colleague, my partner, Scott Weintraub. And really, our vision was, how do you bring data to marketing? Because back in 2007, when we started, there just wasn't a ton of data. It was very creative driven. And, for us, it was like, how do you use data? And one of the things we saw at Pfizer working there was a drug's performance varies hugely across the U.S. Lipitor had a 44 share in Boston at the time, had a 20 share in Cincinnati, and had a 4 share in Nashville. And this just drove the brand managers crazy. They're like, what is going on with these markets? And they just assumed it was the salesperson. We got a great sales guy in Boston. We have a terrible sales guy in Nashville. And the lady in Cincinnati must be doing a good job because she's at the national average. So that was kind of the accepted belief back then. And when we started to look at data across the U.S., you would see all this variability and how a drug performed tied to local factors like what's the formulary, what's the rep's access, what's the patient population, who are the KOLs, and what are the discharge protocols at a hospital. All these things could have a significant share on it. And the problem is when you try to roll things out nationally with the one size fits all, it wasn't going to work in 75% of the places. It would only work in those markets that had those specific issues and local market dynamics. And so we just felt like there was this great opportunity to start a company that used data to really drive marketing strategy. And so first thing we did when we left Pfizer is went and got a patent on how we segmented the US based on using analytics. And we had patent pending for a couple of years, but it was still good from a marketing perspective. And then we finally got the patent office to award it to us in maybe 2010. But that gave us a really nice platform to talk to brands about how do you segment markets? Oh, you don't really think about geographies. Well, hey, a lot of the variability is caused by these geographies. And so that was the beginning of our business. And within about, we were very blessed. Within about a month of starting the business, we got hired by J&J, Sanofi Aventis, and AstraZeneca through networking and kind of bringing this new concept to market around regional marketing, we called it. And yeah, that got us off and running.
And so you had a unique selling proposition, which was great. And so Relevate Health, had a really strong run for a bunch of years. Forward maybe 10 years, I'll gloss over a bunch of things.
Sure.
You got to the point, I guess, where it felt like there were bigger and better things for us to accomplish, but we need help of a private equity group, or we've created a big enough business, we'd like to take some chips off the table, or some combination thereof.
Yeah, Scott was, 10 years old. He's 10 years older than me. So like he was, I'm 54 now. I was probably in my late 40s when we did the transaction. He was in his late 50s. So there's like different objectives. So part of it's chips. Part of it was during COVID. If you think about COVID, everybody went to the Johns Hopkins website to see what the COVID rate was in your zip code. And so we just saw this huge opportunity to really own this idea of local relevance and be able to personalize at the local level. Because now everybody in healthcare understood healthcare is local. And we had a patented, process to be able to do analytics. And, if you fast forward through 10 years, but during those 10 years, we had a number of clients come to us and say, hey, could you develop, like you've done a great job of telling us which markets we can win in. Can you help us now win in those markets? And so we had to start developing some tactics. And the tactics we developed, what made them really interesting was they were scalable. So we would develop a templated, say white paper, and we would change the doctors in those papers. We would take the Cincinnati doctors and put them in the Cincinnati and put local data for Cincinnati. Boston would have a different kind of different set of doctors and data. And so we developed all these scalable solutions. And so that gave us a really nice platform to be able to go out and partner with a private equity firm to really scale this business, because we felt we could really own this local relevance, this personalization in 2020, especially as we had this huge tailwind behind us of everybody's talking local now, because that's how everybody kind of understood that from COVID. And that COVID was just really amplified the whole local variation that these brands all have.
Yeah. And so you're literally just I don't want to say just, but you're focused on providing data, and then the tactics, is that a code word for now how do we market this in the local geographies?
Yeah, and I wouldn't say we provided data. We basically help them interpret their data in a way that can make it actionable. And then we would say, hey, in these 12 markets, KOLs have a huge influence. Let's partner with KOLs to really drive product performance.
And KOLs,
a key opinion leader. Sorry, that's key opinion leader is like a doctor that other doctors look to for information within a local market. And then we could identify, these 12 markets, you have a major formulary issue. People can't get the drug unless they pay a lot of money. So maybe we take another tactic like copay cards and put it in those markets so patients can have access to your medicine. And so that created kind of, over the course of those years, we had a number of, we call them solutions. And so instead of being like an agency of record, we became much more of a, solutions provider that would help brands be able to do things scalable, but also make them locally relevant. And
so then, if you will, you and your partner came to the conclusion that we should now partner with private equity.
Yeah, we had done a deal to buy a hospital marketing company in 2015. And, we thought it'd be really easy. Like, hey, we'll be able to go from pharma to hospitals. We're already kind of working with hospitals. We'll be able to, really scale this business with our expertise. And it was a lot harder than we expected. We took a business that was $6 million and grew it down to $1 million. Now we had some really good benefits out of that business on the pharma side, but the hospital side, we just couldn't figure out how to grow it. And so it made us really think like doing acquisitions is not as easy as we thought it would be. So let's bring in someone who's got some expertise in this space and can really help us do this, because having a small pie is great, but having a bigger, having a slice of a bigger pie is even more. It can even be better. And so we came to our conclusion, like, let's not go off and do acquisitions on our own. Let's get some experts in here who know exactly how to do this and can teach us and can help us and partner with us to really grow this business.
And so you were under 20 million of revenue at that point, right?
Yeah, we were 18 in revenue and about 6 million of EBITDA.
So very nice.
Yeah, good business.
so you guys decide, okay, we're going to partner with private equity. What did you do? Did you engage and hire a banker? Did you start doing things on your own? How did you figure out what to do next?
So the way we got there was in 2019. We got an unsolicited offer for a big number, and we're like, oh, this looks pretty good. Maybe we should consider it. So we hired a banker. We were smart enough to hire a banker to help us like interpret the offer, and the banker came back and said, there's no way you should take this offer. It's way too low. We're like, what? Really? Okay. So that's, in 2020 when, we were starting to look at bankers.
The knock on the door offer, did that come from private equity or a strategic?
It was a strategic backed it was private equity backed strategic. So they were looking to grow. But yeah, it was in our space.
Got it. Okay.
So, love the company, love the guy, that was kind of leading it. But, in retrospect, it was, really a really low offer.
And then you allowed them, I assume, to participate in the process. I assume you hired that banker and then went into a process.
We actually ran an RFP for a banker. And we're like, let's go and talk to several bankers. And we actually ended up selecting a different one, which was a hard decision. But based on kind of the criteria we had and what we were trying to do, we decided to go with a different bank. And so that was a hard discussion, but it was the right call for what we were trying to do, because the bank that helped us the first time kind of worked with smaller companies, and the bank we ended up with had more capabilities and more expertise in our space. But we did run an RFP. So we met with 3 different, investment bankers before we selected, and then we selected one. So that was kind of the process we went through. One thing we did do, which might be a good tip for your listeners, is I hired a third party to do reference checks on the banker, because I didn't want Relevate Health being out there, in the marketplace, talking to people in our space to get references. And so I hired a third party that then did anonymous ones and talked to people who had used this banker. And that also helped make sure we felt comfortable this banker was the right fit for us.
Huh, very good. So then you guys decide, were there any important criteria? Like, you were going to stay on board, right? You were going to focus on getting a second bite. You want to continue to grow.
Yes.
But you also wanted the things that we always talk about on this podcast. You want to take some chips off the table. You wanted to have additional firepower. You wanted additional capability set. Was all that fairly standard, or was there anything unique to what you were looking to accomplish?
Well, I think for us, like, we had built, like we had gone, over those, 15 years of building this business, we had some really highs and some really lows, and some of those lows required, laying people off. And so really learned the importance of values and culture as part of what, we had built at Relevate. And, by 2018, 2019, 2020, we're winning best place to work. We're able to recruit really awesome people. Like, if you don't have a brand name of like P&G or Pfizer, you have to offer something else to get people that want to come join you. So culture's a really important part of that. So as we were looking at kind of who to partner with, kind of values were really important to us. Like, we want to find someone that not only has good values, but we would like to work with. So that was a big criteria. Obviously, finding someone who had experience in our space. Like, if we got to teach somebody about pharmaceutical marketing, teach people what KOLs are, all that kind of stuff takes time. Like, we wanted to make sure we were going to, ideally find someone, because we had met a few, firms that had no experience in our space, and we were going to be their first one in the life science space. And it's just harder. And then the third thing is, like, how do we help our employees, get some value out of this as well? Because, we tried doing profit sharing and, profit rights, all kinds of things. And it's just a lot more complex as an entrepreneur to figure that stuff out. And so we wanted someone to, ideally be able to help us understand how do we help our employees get a benefit? Because none of this happens without people around you to support you and kind of help lead the growth of these types of companies.
So then you ultimately selected the people at Mountain Gate Capital to be your partner. And this is like the end of 2020. And Mountain Gate is a great firm. We had a successful transaction we talked about on the podcast just earlier this year. Yep. They have a great reputation of making sure employees, are successful when the transaction is successful and the rest. First question would be this. If you compare the offer, the value of the company you got from Mountain Gate to the unsolicited knock on the door offer of a few months earlier, Put that into some context for us.
It was like 20, it ended up being like 25% more, because you're running a process, and Mountain Gate did a good job of running ahead of our process. So they were working with us, from as soon as we selected the IB, they wanted all our information and start doing things. But they also, came in, they didn't come in highest, but they came in the top of the range, which was really good. And, one of the things I've kind of watched a lot of entrepreneurs get kind of greedy and try to maximize every last penny. And it's like, part of my goal was the employees benefit out of this too, which means, if I take every penny off the table, it's going to be harder for my partner, Mountain Gate, to be successful for their LPs. And then, second, my employees will get less over time as well. So, that was part of, but they showed well, and they did a nice job of putting together an offer. And they don't just talk about, hey, how much you get up front, but also here's the second bite, and here's what your team will get as part of this as well.
And I would imagine 25% more is more than a couple $1 million more.
Yeah, it was meaningful, and that that value is really good as a platform company to kind of establish that value as you start to grow these businesses.
And then you went from roughly 18-ish million, as you said, to 70 million pretty quickly.
Yeah, and then this year we'll be in the mid 90s.
And so, and that's in 5 years, right?
Less, yeah.
So there's a lot involved in that. A lot of times people gloss over that and say, well, but you did 3 acquisitions and that's how you went from 18 to 90. But that's rapid growth, even with the help of great acquisitions. So my first question is, tell me about the acquisition thought process, because I assume you guys sat around and said, here's where we are today. Here's where we think maximum value will be in 5 or 8 or 10 years, whatever it is. Here's where we're deficient. This is what we need to go source and figure out and get better at. Is that kind of how it went, or was it different?
Well, yes, but a little different. So Mountain Gate had a ton of experience in our industry already. They were behind Real Chemistry, which is now one of the biggest players in our space, and they had sold it to New Mountain Capital, and they wanted to get back in, so they found us. But they had another acquisition lined up for us 2 weeks after we closed, and it was Arteric. And so that was like, mostly them that had done all the work, because I was so busy with, our team trying to get our deal over the goal line that, it's like, hey, we got the deal done now. We're going to close in 2 weeks, the Arteric deal. So that was, and that was a great fit because of the technology and the dev team. Although if you want to talk about, we can talk about some of the cultural challenges with kind of bringing a different company.
Especially within 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a merger versus an acquisition at that point.
Were they about your size?
Oh no, they were probably about half, maybe a little less than half our size. Okay. Which then gave Mountain Gate a really nice platform of almost a $10 million book of kind of EBITDA company. But then soon thereafter we hired a company called Winterberry, and they're kind of a strategic consultant that helps to really build kind of these master plans of what your gap is, what your clients' needs are, and then
Mountain Gate's really big on those guys, right? They like using them a lot.
They do, and they do a nice job, but the biggest value in that is getting alignment across the management team, the PE firm, and the board of what we all need to do, because everybody's getting input into it. You're putting points on which kind of things you think you need, and that creates kind of this master plan that then allows you to really think about how we're going to transform this business from kind of what the niche that we were in this regional marketing into really an industry leader in omnichannel marketing.
So a lot of people are always nervous about telling their people, their employees, here's what we're doing, because they're always nervous about what's going to change. And then right on the heels of that, you're like, oh, by the way, we're also going to double, we're going to increase by. Did that really stress your systems a lot?
Looking back, it was very stressful, because you don't know if you haven't done it before, then it's like you got to figure it out as you go. And Mountain Gate had some good insights and stuff. But in retrospect, kind of the big learnings there is like communicate, because ultimately everybody makes up their own story, and it's usually not a positive ending story. Like they're all, everybody's worried about their jobs, what's going to happen to
When
me.
you say
And so
people always make up their own story, you're talking about the things that your employees are talking to each other about.
Yeah, because if I'm not communicating to them what's going on and kind of where we're going, then they're going to come up,
fill in the void, take
the few data sets they see and make, come up with their own kind of idea of what's happening. And it's usually not good. So, that we really had to learn how to communicate. We also had to make sure like the leaders all supported the deal, because if one of the leaders, is behind the scenes, upset about something, that information spreads very quickly.
And you're talking about your people when you say the leaders.
Yeah, both on our team and the acquired team, the leaders, the founders, we all need to be lockstep. And if there's any issues, we need to be talking about it behind closed doors versus, telling our colleagues about that.
And to underscore that, those, key people are not equity owners, right? Or maybe they will be in the new employee pool, but you are getting consensus with people that have no voting control over your business.
Correct. Yeah, and definitely no voting control. With the Mountain Gate model, they get some equity, Class C shares, which we can talk about if you want. But it basically gives them a chance to be kind of an owner in the company and benefit from the growth. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, you got to be able to have adult conversations and get everybody aligned and make sure that everybody understands where we're trying to go to and gets behind that to make sure that the rest of the organizations are, understanding where we're going and ideally see that as a positive.
Yeah. And Mountain Gate's had a few very successful exits and have made dozens of employees millionaires through those transactions.
Absolutely.
Whether it's A, B, or C shares, right?
It doesn't matter.
Right. Especially when you're having a success and this kind of success that you guys are having. But how much, so to summarize it, I know that Mountain Gate and a lot of good private equity groups do this. They set aside a pool for employees or executives or however that gets decided. And that comes out of the equity that you, your partner in Mountain Gate own, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So maybe just talk through that a little bit. And then who gets to decide how that pool gets split up? Yeah.
So, their model is, getting alignment across the organization. And so they create these, these C shares, and basically 20% of the growth in the enterprise value of the organization goes to the employees. And so that's, as you mentioned, creates a significant amount in some of these transactions that then is dispersed to the employees. The way they they asked me as CEO and the founder, like, hey, how do you want to distribute? Here's how many, C shares you have. How do you want to distribute them? And so my partner, Scott, and I kind of made the decision of who was going to get what, and, tried to be strategic, but also make it so it was going to be meaningful for the people that were included in that.
So then out of the pool that they created, they essentially handed you guys a chunk and said, share them with your team in the way that makes most sense.
Yeah. And then as we brought new, companies in, we'd ask their founders to kind of do the same thing, keeping it kind of consistent with the, amount we're doing at different levels. So it's not like one person gets everything, or it's again, a kind of more of an alignment tool. But it's really, the people who know best are the people who know these people. And so that's how that's how Mountain Gate kind of empowers us to distribute those.
And now looking back, so you closed that deal, you went into the transaction that you closed, then you went into a couple other transactions,
correct?
All of them additive to the business. What do you think changed most about your day-to-day after you partner with Mountain Gate?
Yeah, I mean, it changed a ton. We went from an $18 million company with 80 people to now, even at 70 million, we had 200 people. So now I no longer know everybody. I remember going to our closing meeting in Boston, and we had, we had a dinner that night with like 17 people, and 15 people around the table I'd never had, I didn't know the year before that. So it was all a lot of new people in my life, which is a pretty awesome way to, kind of, you get to, kind of learn new things, meet new people, and grow personally as well as professionally. So my job became a lot more of, now I have a board. Now I have a private equity partner. How do I communicate with them, make sure we're aligned? Had to like really focus on getting new talent because, we added a COO, a chief revenue officer, a chief strategy officer. We started adding, different types of roles. And then even with the new companies we bought, like, with Connection 360, one of their co-founders, Roy, became our chief product officer. And so that, kind of how do you figure out what they're going to do and how do we make sure everyone's aligned? So my role definitely, grew and kind of changed from maybe doing a lot more work now to now setting the vision and holding people accountable and making sure we're communicating and getting alignment internally so we're focused on the right things.
And, you're a thoughtful guy and a good communicator. Did somebody help you figure out, here's the most effective way to communicate to your board, and here's how you should think about private equity and your people? Or did that all kind of come natural, or did you make a bunch of mistakes along the way?
Oh, I'm sure I made a ton of mistakes. Like it's everything on the job training is always the hardest, but I have a great board, and they would reach out and do some coaching and help me think about things. We got a great leadership team. I lean on my CFO a lot because he had some private equity experience before he joined us, and so he would help me think about things. But yeah, I'm sure I could do a lot of things better. But I'm, for the most part, felt like we move things in a positive way forward. But yeah, it's definitely hard. I've thought about maybe there should be a book for founders on how do you learn the language. I mean, even like one of the biggest things that's been interesting to me is like Mountain Gate thinks about things a lot differently than I do, just because they're investors, and so they I'm thinking about how do I put all the chips on the table and kind of grow it as fast as possible. And they have had a few conversations with me as we buy more. I have the ability to buy more with them. And they, talk to me about, hey, diversification is important and you should think about things this way. And so it's been really interesting learning how to be more of an investor versus an operator. And those are just different things, I picked up along the way. But yeah, it's probably more learning on the job than it is, here's the playbook. And, even bringing in Tim, who's professional CEO, I've learned a ton from him because he has, kind of a different way of doing things and a different skill set and a different history. And he's been, fantastic to work with and great to learn from.
So follow-up question as an investor. So you took chips off the table as you do when you do the first transaction, and you guys have been a tremendous success since then. Do you look back and say, oh, I wish I rolled more forward, or I should have taken, or I would have done this differently? Any of that stuff?
No, I've kind of learned over time, like, it's not going to change my life that much if I would have put more in or, taken more out. My partner, Scott's a pretty funny guy. And, one of his, comments that stuck with me was, I got to be careful, how much I leave my wife's next husband, because, she'll probably outlive him. So, that there's a level of, focus more on the clients and building a great culture versus how many dollars are in the checking account. And so like, I've tried not to have FOMO or get overly focused on that because,
So now the next stage of evolution is perhaps moving beyond, I'm going to say, day-to-day CEO work, and you are now the executive chairman. What is in the real world, the day-to-day world, what does that mean? And what drove that decision for you? How much lead time did you give, your board, and talk us through that?
Yeah. So, as you grow a business, like lots of things change, and we went through a ton of, transformational change with Relevate. We went from this niche business into now kind of a major player that focuses on kind of omni-channel with three areas. For me, like a number of people have told me over the years, like your most important commodity or, thing that you have is your time. And so, how do you think about your time in a way that you can, accomplish a number of things through your life? And so that, that made me really think about, what's my vision? I'm, in my 50s. I probably got another, 20 good years of, kind of professional stuff ahead of me. And so what else do I want to do? And so that was something that really kind of weighed on me as we were growing this business. And, as I got to know Mountain Gate better and, talk about different types of things, I learned about this chairman role, which I didn't know about it being a founder and not having, kind of the, PE background. And it sounded like a really interesting way to kind of grow from being this operational guy now into more of a strategic partner, being able to mentor, Tim and the leadership team, kind of keep the continuity of the culture and help steward that as a board member. And so kind of my day-to-day now is, more focused on acquisitions, which I really enjoy and get to do that. I probably spend more time with Mountain Gate than I do with my Relevate colleagues. But it's developing different muscles for me and helping me learn new skills, which has been great. So it's kind of, we do board stuff. It's mentoring. Tim will call me with some of the challenges. One of the tough things about being a CEO, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners can relate to, is you only get the hard problems. You don't get any of the easy ones. Your team below that handles that. And so it's like you're constantly dealing with really, really difficult things. And, I was very blessed to have a partner that I could call and we could talk through things and work together on things. And so, I try to play that role with Tim now because he can't go to your leadership team and say, here's all our problems. And, I feel like we're going to, have all these issues. And so being able to be there for them and support them, is a really valuable role. And just exposing me to new things through acquisitions and not being so tied up in urgent, major problems that you're trying to deal with as CEO. So that's been a really nice evolution.
And can you share any of what you're thinking about from a criteria perspective on M&A, from a capability set, is it size, is it geography? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, so we're, as you kind of mentioned, we're getting towards the end of our time with Mountain Gate. They're really good, and they told us this day one, like, hey, we're really good at helping companies go from 5 million to 30 million of EBITDA, and we're going to be there. So with them, we're still looking very aggressively at HCP marketing companies. And, kind of the vision is we want to be this, instead of being just an agency of record, we really want to be a product solution. We call it operationalized solution company that uses tech and data to automate. And so anything that kind of fits in a line item budget of a pharma HCP marketer, healthcare professional marketer, we're looking to add. And so that was kind of the 3 acquisitions we did with, Axon, Connection 360, and now Level X, to just get us to different lines on the client's budget. And that's another really good tip for your listeners is, as you're kind of building out your business and looking to expand, if you can get a client to share, hey, here's my budget and here's the categories we have in our budget that we spend money on. If you can have, things that automatically fit in those budgets, it's a lot easier to sell than regional marketing, which we would have to go to you, convince you that you had a regional marketing opportunity. And then once you said, oh, this is really interesting, then I have to convince you to now go cancel something else and buy regional marketing because that's not a line item on your budget. So that's what's really helped us scale, is moving from this kind of niche business to really line item marketing, business. And, so anything that fits in the healthcare professional marketing, we're taking looks at and making sure that, it can help us grow client share, wallet share, as we continue to grow the business. Now, post Mountain Gate, we'll probably look at going global. And, there's a big opportunity in Europe with HCP marketing and being able to do things over there that we're doing here. But there's some complexity with that, with all the data privacy rules. And then I think also the whole patient side is another area where we can play with our data-driven solution focus. And that would be the next area that we would probably look to acquire.
Do you think you stay on board maybe for a third bite?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'm open to it. Like I love this business. Obviously, it's my baby. But it also depends on who our next partner is and kind of what their needs are. Like, if we go with a strategic, they may not really need me, or have a place for me. Where if we go with another PE back, maybe there's an opportunity. But definitely open to it. I'm very passionate about healthcare, and it's been awesome. Kind of watching this business grow from the 2 of us to now, 240 people.
It's a great story. I'm thrilled that you were willing to share it with us, because it's the story that I think every entrepreneur aspires to. And it's great to see it play out. It's great to see it play out with a good guy and a good private equity group, and kind of doing all the right things along the way. So, Jeff, we will keep our eyes on Relevate. I wish you the best of success. We thank you for spending time with me, and thank our friends at Fiscal Advocate for sponsoring. And this was just a great episode, Jeff. Thank you.
My pleasure, Todd. Always enjoy listening to what the folks you have on there, and keep learning. So thanks for having me, and look forward to staying in touch.
Thanks for listening to the Second Bite podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.